I've been making slow stitch hair slides, and this is the first one I experimented with, and I just glued it to some old purse leather. I save old purses and I cut the leather off, and some of these I cut on my laser cutter, but these were hand stitched, which I prefer the hand stitching of the slow stitching process. But I decided to make a whole collage of little bits of fabric. So I covered a piece of muslin with a bunch of these fabrics here, and I went to my sewing machine. I just stitched all over it, and then I cut out a whole bunch of these slides, these hair slides like this, and I've got one gluing. I glued the leather to the back of it, and I'm letting it dry on a mug. And so once you come back and embellish these, it really changes the look of these. So the machine sewing method is a lot faster, but I wanted to see how it would work on a piece of Peltex, and this is just a scrap piece that's big enough for a hair slide, and it's double-sided fusible. I normally don't like the fusible, but I want to see how this works out. So I would put a matching fabric on the back, and then I would take all my little scraps of fabric and start laying them randomly all over just to cover this piece of Peltex. And then I would come back with a template and then just cut out my hair slide off of that. So let me get a few fabrics lined up on here and I'll be right back. I haven't fused anything down yet, but one thing that you have to consider is the size of your overall leather piece or whatever backing. In this case we've got the Peltex, but I'm going to have to poke some holes into it in order for the stick to go through. So when you're auditioning, I have a little template I made for myself. You can cut one out of cardboard or whatever, and I left a little window in it. It just kind of gives me an idea of how I want my fabrics to look. And but once I get an idea where that is, I can trace around it with a fabric pencil, and then I can mark the holes, and that'll let me know how everything's going to look, because I wouldn't want a hole right in the middle of my little flower, because that's my little focus piece. So obviously the only fabric that is going to get fused to the Peltex is the ones that are actually touching the Peltex. So after I get this fused down, anything that I need to secure, I can either pin it or get a little bit of fabric. I use a Sewline fabric pin or glue pin for my English paper piecing. So I would just go and secure anything that's sticking up so I don't have any trouble when I get to my sewing machine. Okay, I've got it fused down, and I'm just checking to see where I might need to tack some things down. I don't put a lot of glue, just enough to keep it from shifting while I'm trying to sew my stitching lines. And I do like to go ahead and trim away anything that's beyond the edge of my Peltex, because I don't need that flopping around on the sewing machine. These are great for another project. I told my daughter no fabric scrap too small, and she thought that was funny. Alrighty, so now I can choose threads, whatever threads I want to use. I like mine to show, so I'm probably going to use like a really bright white. And on this one I'm not going to do any decorative stitches. I don't think so at this time. I think I'm just going to do some running stitches. I'm going to raise my stitch length on my sewing machine to about a 3mm and see what that looks like. It's just scraps, so if you don't like it you can scrap it. So I really like the way that looks. Alright, I had made a little chalk mark where I thought I was going to cut out my thing, so I didn't stitch down all of this. If you wanted to use these scraps for something else, you can go ahead and stitch over the whole thing. But I just did lines of straight stitch, about 1/4 of an inch apart. I didn't try to be too precise, and then you're starting to get a little bit of that texture. And so I'm not worried about the raw edges, because over time these little raw pieces are going to start getting frayed, and it's going to add a little bit more interest to the piece. So now what I need to do is go ahead and make sure this is where I want to cut out. And so I'm just going to take some freezer paper templates that I've already used before, and I'm going to press this down as my pattern, making sure again that it's where I want it. So I'm going to go ahead and mark my lines a little bit darker on here, just to be sure I don't lose anything that I want to keep. And I want to make sure it's in a stitched place. I don't want to overlap any places that I haven't stitched, because all this needs to be secure on here. This is a friction pin. So I've got that about where I want it, so I'll heat up my iron and I'll press my freezer paper down. If you've never used a freezer paper template, you do want to put the shiny side down. These freezer paper templates can be used several times before they don't stick anymore, but this one is the second time I've used it, so you just go ahead and just cut around the freezer paper template. So I'm going to go ahead and finish cutting this out, and I'll be right back. Alright, I've got my piece cut out. And I used a piece of leather that I had used before to mark where the holes are going to be, because you don't want to put any kind of embellishment or buttons or anything like that that's going to be in the way when we start poking these holes out, because we have to have a way to put our hair stick in there. So one thing I don't like is the white Peltex showing, and I didn't really have to deal with that too much with the leather. But I'm going to get a fabric marker and go ahead and black that in so it doesn't show. So some projects you may do won't show as much, but this is black, and that white really shows. I'm pretty sure you can use a Sharpie if you want to. I think the Sharpies may bleed, but I've got a tulip. I bought a set of these at Walmart. It's fabric markers so that you can draw on t-shirts and things like that. It's in the crafts section, and I think kids like to paint on t-shirts and stuff like that. So I'm just going to go ahead and color in the whole edge. And then we're going to do one more step before we start embellishing. Okay, I'm going to let this dry, and I'm going to start gathering up some embellishment and beads and things like that, so that I can just start auditioning the stuff that I want to put on here. And I'm going to take this over to my sewing machine, and I'm going to do a blanket stitch or a zigzag or something like that to finish the edge of this, because it's my preference that I don't leave this raw. You can if you want to, or you can just stitch a little running stitch all the way around. Just whatever you decide is fine. Okay, I didn't mention in the beginning, but you can use any kind of fabric. You can mix and match laces and knits and old clothing pieces off of baby garments or wedding dresses, whatever, satin. It doesn't matter what you use for your collage. Now, I like the fuzzy edge because this whole thing is fuzzy with all these raw edges on here, but if you don't like the fuzzy edges, you can get a little glue on your fingers and just rub that down. So that's looking pretty good to me, so I'm ready to gather up a bunch of embellishments and start trying to decorate this thing. Alright, I threw just about everything at this one because on these were my slow stitch projects, and I did want to do a lot of embroidery, just hand embroidery and things like that. So on this one, since I did all the stitching by machine on the fabric, I decided just to cover as much of the fabric as possible, so it'll look like that once the holes get punched. I'm a little worried about these stitches coming undone over time with this being next to your hair. So I am going to glue a piece of felt over the back of it. So looking back, what I could have done was not use this backing fabric right here. The main reason I did was because my Pellon or my Peltex was double-sided fusible, so I didn't want that sticking to anything. So, but it's not a big deal just to add another piece of felt to the back of it. So it's looking the way I want it to, and I don't think I have any more real estate that is available for me to add any more embellishments to. So I'm going to go ahead and glue this on. I've already put a little fray check where I'm going to puncture these holes here, and that'll reinforce that a little bit. So let me go get this glued down, and then we'll punch the holes next. Alright, as far as poking the holes, this very first one I made, I used some leftover leather, and I used an awl till I got the hole reamed out big enough for my sticks. And the rest of them that I've made, I've actually cut out some leather pieces with a nice large hole already in it. But I wanted to try out the Peltex on this machine stitched version of it, so I'm back to using something pointed to poke the hole. My leather punch that I have does not cut a big enough hole in there, so I had to just really get in there and get it big enough to fit most of my my hair sticks that I have. I have some fancier ones that are a little bit thicker. I don't have any handy right here, but they're a little bit thicker than this, so I have to determine how big to make the hole. But what I'm going to do is punch from the front at my marking and just keep pushing. And since I have some fray check on there, it's probably going to be okay. You can go ahead and add some more fray check in there if it gets a little fuzzy, but the whole thing is just raw edge fabric, so I'm not real concerned about that. The eyelet stitch on my sewing machine wasn't big enough around either, or I would have made some sort of a buttonhole, which is another point. You could sew a buttonhole, elongated buttonhole, and that would work really well too. So that idea just came to me. I might try that sometime. So I mean, this is a learning thing for me. I just started trying this out yesterday or the day before. I can't remember when I got the idea to use my slow stitching for a hair slide. So I'm going to keep messing with these holes until my stick, my biggest stick, fits in there. And so far it's almost there. So you'd have to determine your hair stick, whatever stick you're going to use, and make the holes big enough for that. Okay, I'm going to call this one finished. I love slow stitching because through the years I've made so many little samples of tatting and things like that, and I have a little box full of things that I've made, and I really have no use for them other than I just enjoy sitting down and making small things. Yesterday I learned how to make these Yorkshire buttons, and that's pretty much like Tenerife lace, so that was a real relaxing thing to make. So I like to make a lot of little things and just throw them in a box, and then since I found out about slow stitching, I have a place to use all my little embellishments. So I hope you enjoy this project, and if you don't like doing hand embroidery, you can do most of this on the sewing machine as far as the fabric part, and then you just put your embellishments on there.